Mark, you're back, so I'll tee you up. I know you are a big Purdy guy.
Big 49ers guy, sneaky.
Big 49ers guy, and Trey Lance was once the future. They traded up a huge amount of capital to get him, and this is the first kind of open sign that they might be looking to kind of cut ties and move on.
I wouldn't be surprised if something like this happened. I think the big problem PR-wise for a rather Teflon John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, I mean, extremely, like they haven't really needed Trey Lance over these past couple years. They've still gotten deep into the playoffs, is after you gave up so much on a quarterback that has essentially barely been able to be on the field, it looks like today as big of a quarterback whiff as you could find, and somehow that stink doesn't really stick to Kyle Shanahan and company. What do you get back for him? Because it's like there's no way for them to win that battle. And it's like, yes, you're at that point gauging and hoping that the small sample size you got from Brock Purdy is who he really is, because just the league is going to catch up. And it makes me think of our friend Chris Wessling when we got that 6-game sample size from Jimmy G after they traded for Jimmy G a couple years ago, and he looked like the second coming of Joe Montana, and then we got the real version of him, which was much more variable. Do you do all this, and do you go into next season after quarterback depth has been their issue year after year? Do you possibly move on Trey Lance and then go into next season with that quarterback position being like Brock Purdy or bust?
It's Purdy, and then right now Sam Darnold. Greg, let me tee you up just by reminding people what they gave up to get Trey Lance. They traded with the Dolphins right before the 2021 draft. They got the number 3 pick in exchange for the number 12 pick that year, the first and third round pick in 2022, and a first round pick this year. So they paid dearly to get this guy.
Right. It was essentially a similar trade to what the Panthers just gave up to get number 1 overall. That's what it cost. 2 extra firsts and then the extra pick, and you still gave up, the trade down in that draft. And we haven't seen him play. He's had 132 snaps dropping back to pass in the NFL, and half of them were in a monsoon. And so people like to throw out Lance's numbers. In that game, I watched that game. It was just
forget about it.
It was a preposterous game. And the other times, though, he hasn't looked totally ready to go in terms of his little regular season action. Made a couple nice plays. His preseason action, he's looked like a guy who needed development, which isn't surprising for a guy who didn't play that much in college and played at North Dakota State. I think you don't worry about what you get back if it's like reasonable. I mean, the Lions just traded Jeff Okudah, who was the number 3 overall pick in the draft. Just one draft after Lance or one draft before him, like the exact same, level, and they got a 5th round pick back and you move on. If they could get like a second for Trey Lance, I think they would take it. And I think the fact that Ian is reporting this and the way you framed it, Dan, I think was smart. The way Ian reported this makes you think like this is very much like the 49ers a year ago putting out similar reports that they're getting offers about Jimmy G. Now, maybe history is instructive there. Nothing ever happened. But it really feels like it's the 49ers who are putting up a little bit of a for sale sign here on Trey Lance, which would tend to make you think it spells the end of him.
This is fantasy. It's fugazi. But there is like logic to that 2021 NFL draft, which started with Trevor Lawrence and moved to Zach Wilson, then to Trey Lance, top 3. Mac Jones taken 7 or 8 picks after that. Trey Lance for Mac Jones? Doesn't that make some sense? Trey Lance for Zach Wilson? I don't know. Like
Fields was Fields?
Oh, Fields was in there too.
Yeah, and then Mac Jones at 15.
Right. So, I mean, that was when you look at that, obviously Lawrence is a hit. Zach Wilson is a bust right now. Trey Lance is, trending toward bust, but he still hasn't played enough. Justin Fields, the Bears think that's a big hit. And Mac Jones is this big question mark. I just wonder what Trey Lance's market is, because the things he has working for him that, for instance, the Jets don't have with Zach Wilson, who I'm sure they would like to trade if they could, is Zach Wilson played a fair amount and not only showed that he was injury prone, he showed that he wasn't playing at a high level and then handled some things poorly with the media. Lance is still kind of a mystery on some level.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the Mac Jones thing is interesting because obviously there's some connective tissue to Kyle Shanahan. I don't know how Zach Wilson would ever be involved in a trade for Trey Lance. I think you can still look at Trey Lance and say, untapped potential. There's a lot teams think they probably could do with him. There are tools there. He just had extremely light college experience and has extremely light NFL experience, so it's an unknown. A team that stands out, though, to me a little bit because it keep feel like we are hearing that the Texans are not interested in maybe taking a quarterback at number 2. You've got D'Amico Ryans, who knows Trey Lance. You got Bobby Slowick, their new offensive coordinator, who was the passing game coordinator under Shanahan and worked closely with Lance. They'd at least know what they think they're dealing with, and you could get them for cheap and then use those first-round picks to make your team better.
That could make some sense. Like the Titans could make some sense. I mean, I don't doubt in any way Ian's reporting. So he's saying that they're fielding calls, and he's clear to point out they're not making them. Now, if you're Trey Lance reading this reporting, I don't know if you are that invested in the parenthetical that they're not making them. I think you see these reports and you're not too excited about it if you're Trey Lance. But I don't doubt that teams are making those calls, and I'm sure those calls are like, how low is this price, essentially? Because I'm sure a team like the Titans would take on Trey Lance if the price was like a compensatory third-round pick. I doubt it's that low, and it's figuring out during the draft how low will the 49ers go. Like the Lions, for instance, again with the number 3 pick, I know it was a cornerback and is 1 year older. They basically were just ready to give away Jeff Okudah no matter what. They had decided that. Allen Robinson, who we'll talk about later. The Rams were going to give him away no matter what. I don't think the 49ers are at that point. I think they're closer to where they were with Jimmy G a year ago, which is if they don't get the right price, and I'm just going to guess a 2 sounds about right for them, then maybe they just hold on to him one more year and see what happens as a backup, because it's too late. His peak value is gone. It reminds me a little of another Trey with the Hawks, Trey Young right now. It's like the value. It's too late to trade Trey Young. Different sport. I know it's not the same as the NFL, but in some ways
Football
it's similar.
Is completely different than basketball. In that case, it may not be.
Maybe not.
It really makes like if you were betting.
Trey Cool of Green Day, his value was higher maybe in 2004. Now, what are you going to get?
I'm just saying that if
drummer.
you had like bet of
time.
all the possible Mark drops, of things he said, it's kind of bizarre. That's the one that's been hammered the most on this podcast.
It's got legs. Legs for days. Last thought before we move on, because we got to move, because we got Solak coming up. Butterfly effect, dog. Like, Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. They had no intentions of playing him, and now you fast forward a few months, half a year, and he is their locked and loaded future right now, they think. They let Jimmy G go. They're going to trade potentially the number 3 pick from a couple years ago, and then it's Sam Darnold who's backing up Brock Purdy. It's like there's a lot invested in Purdy being the real deal now in San Francisco, unless there's something else up San Francisco's sleeve.